Welcome back to the podcast, Amanda.
Hiya.
Nice to have you here again. So today we are talking about loss, and I think it's good to define, as always, what loss is, because it comes in many forms, doesn't it? So how would you go with that one first?
I'm a massive advocate for this stuff, because what I'm finding working with in bereavement is that a lot of people come in thinking that grief and loss is just about a death. And actually, we're affected massively throughout our lives by loss, but not realising that the feelings that we feel about it are actually grief, because society isn't really accepting of grief. When we get divorced, when we lose a pet, when we made redundant, friends move to a different place. There's so many different types of loss. What I'm noticing is that when people are coming to see me, for bereavement counselling, they are overwhelmed by the deep reactions that they have. And of course, it is to do with the person that they've lost, but often there's echoes from other losses throughout their life.
Yeah, for sure. Do you see certain patterns come up when you have a new client come in with loss?
I mean, it's difficult to say. Everybody grieves differently, and a lot of it is relational. So you might grieve differently for your mum than you would for your dad, because it's all to do with the relationship that you have with them. But I often see things that seem to be a pattern across the board. In terms of avoidance is a classic. Somebody who's suffered miscarriages and has had that experience where, oh, right, you had a miscarriage, let's get back to work, for example. And so they've never dealt with it. They've never looked at it, because that's my experience. That's been society's expectations. So then when they've come to me and they've lost somebody very close to them, often those expressions of grief can be overwhelming.
This is very common. I see people kind of give themselves like a time limit almost of, I should be okay now, it's been X amount of time, or I shouldn't be thinking about this stuff now, it's been a year already, I've gone through all the firsts, why is this still a struggle? And people will try force it a lot of the time for societal expectations, a lot of the time going back to work. What that does is exactly what you're saying. It buries a lot of those feelings which don't go away and do manifest into other areas of your life or explode, anger, other things, affect your identity and sometimes too. So what that does is it just stores it. It doesn't dissolve it. It stores it, which comes out anyway regardless. And then eventually when people do come to look at some of this, or years later, it can be such a flood and really difficult to process even more at that time, because there's more things happened in that time, exactly what you said around kind of the loss being associated with other things. It's then a whole spider's web of things to work with, as opposed to the grief from the original loss.
Exactly that, yeah. And another really common thing that I see is anxiety coming out in people that are suffering. And most of the time it's because they're trying to keep those emotions under lock and key somewhere, because they're too difficult to deal with. But as these emotions build up and build up, they've got to find a way to go. And quite often, as you said, it could come out as anger, irritability, but I think the most common I see is anxiety.
There's a lot, isn't there, to explore. This is a very, very complex area of reflection. In some of the areas that you mentioned, miscarriage, loss, bereavement, a job, other things. Another loss I'm going to put in there of when people cut family off, They don't realise actually that that's a loss, and you go through a grieving process there. What do you see come up specifically for the person? How does it ricochet outward?
Shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of regret, there's anger. Funnily enough, I'd say that anger is the thing that people don't acknowledge the most. This is my fault, I am the one that's done this, or if I'd have just done this, this would have been different. So very much it becomes their point of view that they are the one at fault, and then often they perceive what other people around them are thinking rather than asking for help.
In relationships too, you've already touched on the relational elements of it. What do you think are some of the things that are a struggle in relationships after experiencing some of this, or during actually too? It starts in that whole process. What are some of those things?
I mean, I suppose from my own point of view, I think that some people can become very introverted. They can begin to push people away, or you can have the opposite, where you cling to it and suffocate the other person in the relationship because you're afraid. So abandonment, rejection, and then clinginess, irritability, depression. Because, I mean, like, if you look at a family unit, if you have all lost that same person and yet all of you had very different relationships with that person, so you all grieve in very different ways. If, say I'd lost a job and I'm grieving for being made redundant, they might also be scared about what the repercussions are going to be. A dog dying or a divorce, how that affects the whole family dynamic and wider.
This is very good key points, because everyone deals with things differently and we're all coming from a different lens at all times. Essentially, it's why we then have to look at it with emotional things too, rather than a physical object, and think about what's going on for that person. So in therapy terms, it's frame of references. There's also meanings involved. There's experiences, there's belief systems. There's lots and lots of things that come into how I view something to how you view something. So something so complex as grief, loss, all of this stuff, it's a whole in your life, regardless of what kind of loss it is. But we all deal with it and see that differently. And I think there is a version that people put on another person because it's how they would deal with it. Or they might see, why are you not upset? Because you've trying to deal with this thing and I'm upset about it. And it's like, you don't care. I hear a lot of these kinds of things. But you really do have to remember, and it's easier said than done because, again, really difficult area to deal with. But you do have to try and bring it back to reality and see it from the other person's point of view.
Yeah, it's just about emotional process. It's like anything. We all deal with things in different ways. I mean, like, I am quite an extroverted person. I'm a talker. I talk to process the way that I feel. But then other people are not. They're very quiet and they might be more introverted so that they've got time to process. Well, it's exactly the same with loss. It's exactly the same thing, whatever that loss is. It's just about being there. You know what I mean? And with certain things, I always think about, certainly bereavement. There's an expiration date, people think, as you said earlier, and somebody told me years ago about, you've got to go through all the first and then one more day and then that'll be it. And that wasn't true for me. And I found that really difficult to cope with because suddenly I had this wide open space of time where I didn't know if I was going to feel terrible or not. Time doesn't heal. It helps, but I find that you just get used to it.
Yeah, this is very true. And These are the kinds of things similar to trauma, loss, lots of things that people are dealing with where it's not something you get over or deal with, these kinds of phrases that are thrown around. It's something you learn to sit beside, and the pain is always there, regardless of if it's a good day or if it's a bad day. And you learn about yourself, you learn about life and loss and death and time. And these are all kind of common things that come up around these kinds of areas. But ultimately, you just moving through it. There's no shortcut. There's no like deadline. You naturally have to learn to like know yourself enough so that you can manage some of this stuff. And sometimes it might be more relevant than other times. Sometimes it might be really kind of in-your-face struggles that you're dealing with. Sometimes it might be really subtle. Sometimes you might have people you talk to about it. Sometimes you might be really selective in who you talk to about it. But nevertheless, these things are always there, and it's not something that has an on-off switch.
Exactly. I always struggled with the stages of grief. It's a well-known thing. And when I went into grief, I expected to go through each stage, and when I come out of the end, that would be it. And that is not the case. That is not. You can bounce around from one to the other. But I think that that's something that people don't realise. But again, for myself, I think that there was a lot of unprocessed loss beforehand. So it's about unpacking that.
Also going to drop in some themes that I see consistently come up, and really taboo areas. So in my sessions, I encourage clients to talk about all the deepest, darkest. I love those kinds of conversations. Comfortable in my own darkness, and I love it when clients feel confident enough to bring some of that stuff up with me. It's a real honour. Obviously not a nice experience, but it's necessary a lot of the time. So with that in mind, death is one of those topics which is directly linked to some of this. And running out of time, timelines, it puts extra pressure on people with attachment stuff that you've already spoke about as well. But these are kinds of areas that everyone's thinking about, no one's talking about. And when a loss comes up or a bereavement comes up, it makes you reevaluate your life, doesn't it? And you have different phases of that in this wonderful thing we call life, this journey that we're on too. And yeah, these kinds of topics are not really encouraged in society. People will avoid talking about death like the plague and be uncomfortable. I see it in sessions. It's really difficult to bring in. And eventually, as we kind of open it up, actually everyone's got a lot of thoughts around this topic. And it's really interesting on people's belief systems too. But yeah, how do you see some of those things come into loss and bereavement when you're working with it as well?
Well, people are scared of death. Once death comes to their door, you know, they've got to face it and find it really difficult, as well as people who try to minimise, you know, or rescue when they're talking to you. Quite often it's not about you, it's about them, because they don't know what to say because it makes them feel. So, you know, I do sort of say, you know, you'll know the ones that are there because they might not say anything, they might just sit next to you or just drop you a text.
What do you think would be something that is helpful? So this is a common thing, isn't it, where people are like, I don't know what to say, or there is that awkwardness, isn't there, around some of it. What do you think is important for a relational element of helping someone deal with something like this?
Yes, so I think what's really common is to feel completely alone. Again, as I said earlier, you know, because everybody grieves differently, it's very difficult to be in somebody's frame of reference, especially in the very early stages. So I think, for me, I think the best thing to say, not ask if, you know, are you okay? You know, to maybe drop a text saying, I know you're not okay. Is there anything I can do? You know what I mean? Just send in an emoji, anything. Because one of the hardest things is having to mask how you feel when you feel that low. And people so common. That's what people do because they don't want to burden other people with their pain, or they don't want to worry people. So, just saying, I'm here. That's it. It doesn't have to be long or convoluted. Just, yeah, I know you're not okay, but I'm here.
Do you think that there are certain things beyond kind of relationship stuff now that are really helpful, or vice versa, things that can be damaging in these kinds of circumstances?
I think you've got to give people time. I think what's really damaging is trying to force somebody to move on, or in your time limit. I think that, it's helpful for people to be around other people that have been through loss, that understand. Because if you haven't experienced loss, it is very difficult to understand it to the same level. And so because of that, you might find yourself saying the wrong thing or being afraid to say the wrong thing. So for somebody to be around other people, if that's what they want to do, I think is a very, very helpful thing.
I think important to bring up, so bargaining. So a lot of the time in loss and bereavement, there's a mental process of bargaining that happens, and I see it a lot. And it can come in form of, if it's a person, why not me? Take me instead, these kinds of things. Judgment, blame, anger, these kinds of things. Well, if it's kind of a job, trying to people please, trying to put things right, trying to force something that doesn't fit. And this can come in many different formats and many different versions. What do you think are some of the things that people can do if they're in that mental process that can help kind of pull it back to themselves and be present, seek support, be able to process, have the space for themselves to work through some of this stuff?
Yeah, so I would say that how much of what is going on for you is perception of other people's needs. Come back to yourself, do some reflection, write a journal, spend some time with yourself, have some self-care, think about what it is. People pleasing again is so common, isn't it? Who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for them? Are you doing it for you? If you're doing it for them, why? Why are you doing it for them? You're doing it for you. Why? What will you get out of this? Really think about it, because quite often it's got nothing to do with you doing it, or you're doing it as a response, sometimes a trigger or a feeling. So I would say spend a lot of time reflecting on why you're doing things, what you're actually doing. Are you perceiving what somebody else has said or is doing? Are you taking it as it's your fault?
Yeah. Also, on kind of some of the back of that, fear links in, doesn't it, to bargaining and some of these behaviours. What do you think we should learn about fear in response to loss and how we deal with it?
Fear plays such a massive part of everything, actually, but especially of loss, because often we can spiral into things. Say you're made redundant, you could spiral very quickly into, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my family, I'm going to lose everything, I'll have nothing. I think again it's about staying present in that moment. Unfortunately, where fear is concerned, often that can cause the emotional side of your brain to take over, can cause you to go into survival mode. So it's about trying to stay in the moment and stay grounded.
Why do you think fear and overall emotions now, because there's a whole kind of range of emotions that comes into stuff like this. It's very complex. It's not always really obvious what you're feeling either. Some people also avoid a lot of their emotions. Why is it important to feel these emotions to the core when going through something like this?
It's interesting that you asked me that, because that's not something that I did right at the start. So I lost my mum, and when I lost her, I literally felt nothing apart from relief. I felt very, very numb, and I felt that way for about a year. And that was really difficult because I felt guilty about it. I felt ashamed of it. I felt angry about it. And then I hurt my back and was laid up. And then suddenly this whole overwhelming amount of emotions came over me. I could not stop crying. I was anxious. I was angry and irritable with everybody. I felt terrible guilt and regret and shame. Without a shadow of a doubt, it made my grief journey harder and longer because I did that. When my dad passed away 2 years after my mum, I made a conscious effort to deal with it differently. And so I spent a lot of time reflecting. I tried to sit with how I felt. Because with my mum, I could feel the emotion bubbling up, and I could feel myself pushing it back down. And with my dad, I didn't. I let it come. Now, it was hard because there you had 2 losses within a couple of years, and during COVID. And so it was really difficult. But I would definitely say that having gone through that, I wish that I had dealt with things in the moment. And I see that with a lot of clients that come to me. I can see the ones that are avoiding it, that are telling me, I don't feel emotional at all. I don't feel anything. That's a really common thing. And then I have other clients that come that are seemingly really angry, but when you ask them, they're not angry. Because it's really difficult to express anger towards somebody that's no longer here. And yet a really common thing, because you can feel abandoned.
Thank you for sharing that. There's obviously a very personal element to talking about loss in this for you. Do you think that in some of these experiences, so your first approach and your second approach, and obviously we're talking zoomed out here, when you're in it, it's very different, isn't it? But do you think that in those experiences that you had, you recognised actually how you were feeling or what emotions were coming up?
Definitely not the first time. I'd say the first time I just felt nothing. I just felt, not that I didn't feel anything, I just felt completely numb. And I realised now that, my brain was protecting me from this immense pain. But the second time, I definitely did, because I had something to compare it to. But it's only been in hindsight, through going through therapy myself, that I've recognised the sort of wide amount. And that's why it was so overwhelming, because it was so many things all at once. And again, I think it's something I said last time, you don't just feel one emotion, you can feel all of the emotions all at the same time. And I think a lot of people in grief do.
Do you think that making sense of some of these emotions is the way forward, or what would you encourage in kind of making sure that you do allow it to pass through your body, like you said? Do you think, where is the line between making sense of things and feeling things and doing life, let's be honest, because that comes into it. You don't just get to pause the world or life or responsibilities when things like this happen. Where's the line, do you think?
I think that first of all, you've got to give yourself some time. I think right at the start, you have to give yourself some time to come to terms with adjusting to how life is, because regardless of what loss it is, life can look very different. So I think that that's the first thing, so that you can reflect on how you feel. As you say, we've all got busy lives. I mean, me with 4 kids, exactly the same thing. You have to allow yourself some time, otherwise life just takes over. If things are very difficult for an extended amount of time, very difficult, then I think that you need to start looking at other options of what you can do. And that might not be counselling, that might be talking to somebody that you trust, and explaining how you feel and how difficult things are. But everybody's different. That's the thing. I think when you can recognise that these feelings are becoming a problem, that's when you need to ask for help. And often that's the hardest thing.
Do you think that there's a way you can go into some of these emotions easier without the pressure or expectation? How can you access of this stuff in a healthy way, do you think?
Again, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult question because it depends what your experiences have been before of loss.
So emotional part aside for a moment, if we think about some of the other areas of loss, what do you think are ways that we can make sense of things sometimes, or accept a new path, for example, and move through it and recognize this as a different path and see it as a pivotal moment and reframe some of those thoughts in a cognitive way alongside some of the emotions?
I think it's all about attitude, isn't it? I think if it's something that you've wanted to do for a long time, or it's something that you're interested in, come from quite a positive place, and it's easier to reframe it. I think it's more difficult if this has been something that's been forced upon you, like, redundancy or something, or even a divorce. We think about divorce as being a negative thing, but for some people it isn't, and they can see it as a change. But I think a lot of it comes down to where you are in that moment and how positive you can be. So I think, if you can think of it in a positive light, then, it could be an avenue to new things. If you're not in that place, then, maybe talking to somebody that you trust, or getting some help to reframe things, I think is the best advice I can give, really.
I often say to a lot of my clients that change is a good thing, and we need reminding of that sometimes, because we will fight against change, and it's actually really healthy for us because it's how we grow, it's how we develop, it's how we learn about ourselves. Sometimes redirection, and change is a really important part of life, isn't it? Whether it be loss or other things that we're working through. And yeah, these kinds of areas, it doesn't just change one thing, does it? It changes a whole lot of things in our life, and that's a whole lot of change to then process and learn from and keep working through. And it's not linear, as we've kind of already said. So I think change and recognizing that and having the awareness, doing the work on yourself, owning your shit when you're not being a great person, and treating people as best as you can, but also recognizing all parts of working with a lot of this stuff, and trying to be as real with yourself and others as possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, I think that talking to those around you is a really pivotal part of this. I know that, like kids, for example, we try and shelter them from a lot of things, but ultimately, whatever affects you affects everybody in your life as well.
A little bit of a sidestep here, and at the practice we don't work with children, it's 16 plus. However, I know in a lot of your work you do. What's important to share with children, especially around death, bringing that back in, because this is a key topic people are scared to bring up a lot of the time, or we'll ask questions on, and loss and big changes in the family unit, divorce, these kinds of topics. What do you think is important for children in this?
Well, I think the most important thing is don't lie. Don't lie and say lies. Maybe a bit hard, but don't say, "Oh, they went to sleep," or "Oh, they've just gone away on a work trip," or something like that. Because one, it can destroy the trust that you have, like a parent and child has. Walls have ears, and so kids tend to know a lot more about things than you give them credit for. And then that can build up anticipation. So being real with them, be authentic with them to, as appropriate level depending on how old they are. But, kids understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And sometimes we just have to, sit on that roller coaster with them and just, let them feel those emotions. It's important.
Very well put. Grief is kind of like that, isn't it? It comes in waves. It's a pain as deep as the ocean a lot of the time, and it comes in waves.
I also think it's really important that you don't shield them when you get upset. It's okay to be sad. It's all right. And if you can see an adult is sad, especially in a situation like death, then it gives the child permission to be sad too, which is healthy.
All part of learning, isn't it? Modeling that for them. Do you think that we talk about these kinds of topics enough?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think that people don't understand what grief is in any form, especially in this culture, because other cultures do death and bereavement and grief much better than we do. I think that we should talk to each other about our wishes. It make life a lot easier. I think that children should learn about it because it's important for them to understand that although a loss might be difficult, it's not the end of their world.
Very, very true. There is a lot of cultural differences around some of this too. In the UK, it's kind of a fast-paced, here's your deadline type version. Not always, but the majority that I see. Mexico, for example, they have a death festival, which I think is remarkable. And they actually keep the bones of their loved ones and will celebrate every year in the graveyard. In Turkey, it's very, very intense, very, very quick, but a lot of the emotional outlet is there. And yeah, there's lots of different versions that we have. And again, it kind of comes back to doing what's right for you, isn't it? But acknowledging that these areas can't just be skimmed over in whatever culture, in whatever belief system, in whatever religion, in whatever your beliefs on afterlife is. It's about being in it yourself. And I think we, as a society overall now, do have this version of hiding these kinds of topics because ignorance is bliss. And if we bring it in, it creates more fear. And originally it does. When you start talking about death with people, they will open up about, I'm scared of myself dying, I'm scared of my partner dying, I'm scared of anything happening to my children or my dog or my best friend, I'm scared of all of this stuff and health anxieties. And when you open it up, there is an element of that. It does kind of flood every fear around these kinds of topics. But it's important, again, to work through some of that because a lot of it is irrational a lot of the time, and you can't live in fear. It's a part of our existence. We're all going to die at some point. Very morbid, but very true. And these belief systems that we have create like this idea that if we use a jigsaw, for example, and we take a piece out that represents the loss, so in society overall, we would fill that as quick as possible and pretend that it's not there. And it doesn't work. That doesn't work because all we're doing is masking, and we're not acknowledging that that loss is a loss because it's still relevant. And the people that we lost, why would we want to do that as well? Why would we want to forget them? Why would we want to fill that hole? Why would we not want to respect them and remember them and love them and feel angry with them for leaving us? Those are all natural responses. It's always generally around building around it because you don't have to forget, you don't have to fill that hole, and you can still have a very full picture of a life with a hole in it, and acknowledging that and being beside that and for yourself too. And yeah, we need to reframe some of this stuff and talk about some of this stuff and like exactly what you said, think about what we want for ourselves because realistically it's going to happen for all of us at some point, and we have to be able to communicate around the difficult stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose something, and not necessarily just a death, but when you lose something pivotal, it can really change you as a person. And it might be, maybe you got a promotion, or maybe you decided to move to Australia, maybe, having a baby. I mean, people often don't think about it like this, but when you have your first baby, you're losing, your single, or your I don't know what you call
Identity.
Identity. Yeah, especially as a woman. And so, we don't acknowledge that. We don't acknowledge that it is very difficult to give up what you've had before or what you have now. But it changes your life completely, just like a death.
What do you think is important to say to someone if you wanted to give someone, not necessarily some advice, but just some words of comfort, I suppose, of a grounded version that's real?
You don't have to be okay. I think that would be my first thing. It's okay to not be okay right now. I'm here. Knowing that there is somebody there that can, that will be there for you is helpful, but also that doesn't force itself upon you when you don't need it or when you don't want it.
And of course, you're not going to be okay. Something like this is an unfathomable amount of pain, and it's not something that you are just generally okay around. And why would you be? It's something that's turning your whole life upside down, and in whatever loss that is now, of everything you've ever known, everything you ever want for the future. And it's not something you are just going to be passive about. It is something that is going to disrupt everything about you, your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And grieving for yourself, even from things that you've experienced, relationships that you've lost, where you've lost yourself, and a childhood, or a job itself that you really, really wanted, or other things that you wanted to experience. There's a whole grieving process among everything that we go through.
I mean, abuse. People, I think it's only just now being recognised that often people that are abused grieve for themselves. Or anything. We can grieve for anything.
Okay. Thank you for coming back on the podcast.
All right.
Very nice discussion, as always.